Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with the third and final video, for now, in mine and Hannah's Underhyped books series. So we've done this whole series of recommendations. We also had a live show at the beginning of this project, and all of these obviously focus on underrated or underhyped books in different categories. I will of course link Hannah's blog down below, as well as her posts that she has done in this series. We've had a ton of fun doing this, and we both have decided that probably we will kind of throw some more recommendations in as time goes on, but this is like the official third category, and this is going to be books that are underhyped even by me. So like even I don't talk about these books enough, and I'm really excited to talk about them now. Before I get into the video, I do want to give a quick reminder for some of the things going on in the world. As I've said before, I shouldn't really be anybody's like primary source. That's not what I'm trying to do, but there are some starting places in the description box. For example, helping Afghan refugees and lending your support to Haiti after the earthquake. A special note on Haiti is do not donate to the American Red Cross. Last time there was apparently an issue where a huge amount of the money that was supposed to go towards rebuilding the community did not go there. Don't really know what happened to it. So I will link a few sources down below that have marked like reliable places to donate that are actually like working directly in the communities, giving the money directly to the people who need it. Another thing in the description is some very simple and easy guides to voting in the California recall election. If you are a Californian, it's really important that you vote. Please don't skip it. You should have already gotten your mail ballot. It's going to be very easy to fill out. So please check that out. And of course there are a lot of other resources down there as well in the description box. I just wanted to mention like a few of the newer ones. And like I've said before, even if I don't specifically talk about those things in a video, I do try and keep that description box updated. So now into the video. I also want to mention that I am filming with the window open because it's very warm today, so hopefully the ambient noise is not too distracting. But let's go ahead and get into these books that I love, that are fantastic, and that I don't talk about enough. And the first one I want to mention is A Good Kind of Trouble by Lisa Moore Reme. In this book we follow a young black girl named Shayla, and Shayla, or Shay, is pretty quiet and shy. She doesn't feel super comfortable being really like outspoken and drawing attention to herself, and her older sister is very involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. And so the book is really about Shayla like learning more about that movement and realizing that there are ways that she can stand up for what she believes in. This book really shows a lot of different ways that you can be an activist, and I just really love the element, like the storyline of Shayla becoming more confident in using her voice, both literally and figuratively. I just think that's really lovely, and I think it is so cool that we have a middle grade book that focuses on the Black Lives Matter movement like this. And yeah, I just would highly recommend this one. It deals with some other topics as well, like the idea of people being black enough and just like different interpretations of identity. So a really wonderful book. I also want to mention The Lost Frost Girl by Amy Wilson. This is a fantasy novel, like it's like a contemporary fantasy novel, and we're following our main character, who is a girl who finds out that she is the daughter of Jack Frost. Our main character is named Owl, and she becomes determined to meet her father, and so the story is about that. There also is kind of a possible threat related to this like magical world that she ends up discovering. So it's about Owl discovering who she is, discovering like some wintry powers she might have. There's a really great friendship in here as well, and I just think this is a really wonderful atmospheric book. I really enjoy Amy Wilson's writing style as well, and I think it's a writing style that will probably appeal to a lot of different kinds of readers. Like I don't feel like it goes too far overboard in like any direction, if that makes sense. Like it's whimsical without being over the top, it's descriptive without being like super flowery. I just really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to read more from her. The next one, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but books can end up in this category for several different reasons. Sometimes it's because books are really popular already and it almost feels redundant for me to talk about them, which you'll see in the next one here. And sometimes it's like books that I really love, but they're very hard to recommend to people for whatever reason. So you'll see a lot of those as well. But the very popular one I have to recommend is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is just like a very well-known book. A lot of people love it, some people don't, and I feel like either way it's like a very well-known book. So I just don't talk about it a lot, but I really should because I love this. It's really probably one of my favorite romances that I've read. And one thing that really stands out about it is that there are things that frustrate me in a lot of romance books that this book does exceptionally well. Also, it has some of my favorite tropes. We have hate to love, we have a fake marriage plotline, and I just really enjoy that. And the things that this book does really well that tend to irritate me is there's like kind of a, I don't even want to say it's like a misunderstanding, although I guess it kind of is. Basically, the reason that Olive and Ethan, the main characters of this book, the reason that they start out really not liking each other, on at least one side, it is the result of a misunderstanding, but when you find out what happened, it really makes sense, which I appreciate. And then also like the dreaded third act breakup that I hate, in this book, not only does it make sense, like, is this something that, yeah, you guys would have to talk about it. I believe that this would come up and that it would be a huge obstacle in the relationship, but also it was done in such a way that I'm like, Olive, like, because I think Olive's a great main character. Like, if this hadn't been a stumbling block for her, like a deal breaker, I don't think I would have thought quite as highly of her. So I just like really appreciate the way that was done. There's some great chemistry. I know that not everyone was happy with how like fade to black the sex scenes were in this one, so that is something to note, but I really enjoyed this. Next, I have a graphic novel, and I just don't read a lot of graphic novels in general, but I really should make more of an effort to talk about the ones that I have read and that I really loved. And one of those is Rapunzel's Revenge by Shannon and Dean Hale, illustrated by Nathan Hale. This is as you can probably guess, a fairy tale retelling of Rapunzel. It's set in kind of like a Wild West ish sort of setting. I love the characters. I think that Rapunzel and Jack's dynamic is so much fun. I'm really impressed with how well the dialogue is done also. Like, it doesn't feel like it feels like it really like supports the story, you know? I also like the art style. Let's see if I can show that. So yeah, I just think this is a ton of fun and I would recommend it. And I'm somebody, again, who doesn't read a lot of graphic novels, who tends to have a hard time with them, so I feel like it's an extra recommendation because it worked for me. Next I have a nonfiction book, and that is They Were Her Property by Stephanie E. Jones Rogers. I do own this one. I think I actually own all of these books, but again, I can't get to all of them right now. And this is fantastic. So this is a nonfiction book that talks about the active part that white women had and continue to have in racism. Specifically, this book focuses on white women as slave owners and as like slave like overseers, or not overseers, but like, I think in a lot of American sources there's like a tendency to view white women as less complicit or less active because they're women, and that is absolutely not true. I think this book does a really great job of showing why that's not true. I have seen several people talk about this one, so it's not like completely unknown in like the book blogging world or anything, but I do think this is really well done. Next, I have the other graphic novel on this list, and this is Sleepless, Volume 1 by Sarah Vaughan, Lila Del Duca, Elisa Sala, and Darren Bennett. And I really love this. So this was actually a gift from my friend Amy at Blunt and Bookish. This was like a few years ago, and I just really enjoyed this. I need to at some point read the second volume because I love this. This is a fantasy graphic novel, and we're following these two main characters. One of them is, I think she's like a noble lady, and this is like her kind of bodyguard, and their relationship is so well done. Like, I didn't think, it's funny, I don't think of myself as somebody who likes necessarily the like character and their bodyguard like kind of relationship dynamic, but I really like it here. Like, the tension is so good. I also love the art style. Let's see if I can find a good page. I mean, it's all beautiful. I like the color palette too. And this, her bodyguard, he's a sleepless, which, you know, as you would guess, it means that he can't sleep. So that's a really interesting element. And yeah, there's like a lot of really great political intrigue, and I really do think that the relationship between these main characters is one of the highlights. So I really enjoy that one too. Next I have I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai and Christina Lamb, or with Christina Lamb. This is a very, very famous book, but this is another one where like it's so famous that maybe it slips my mind to talk about it sometimes. But I really thought this was fantastic. This is Malala Yousafzai's like memoir or like autobiography about not only like what happened to her very famously when she was shot by the Taliban, but also like what her life was like leading up to that, how she became an activist for girls and women in education. And I just think this is a really fantastic book. I think that Malala's voice comes through very clearly in this. Like, it feels very conversational. One thing I also appreciated is the way that she talks about the US's involvement in the Middle East. Like, I think that's something that a lot of Americans don't necessarily think about enough, and I think she just lays it out very well and very clearly. And again, just like the focus on all that she has achieved and what a strong and compassionate and brilliant person she is. I just highly recommend this one. I feel like I didn't quite end that sentence properly, but you know what I mean. This book is great. Next, I have The Running Dream by Wendelin Van Draenen, and I don't know that I have ever mentioned this book after my like wrap up where I talk about it. So this was during that like audiobook experiment period or like video that I did, which I will link down below if you want more thoughts, because I did listen to this on an as an audiobook, which I actually thought was brilliant. That was one of my most positive audiobook experiences in that video. So I would recommend the audio, but but I also ended up picking up a physical copy because I loved this and I will want to return to it. You can also see that it won the Schneider Family Book Award, which is about disability representation in literature. As far as I know, this is not Own Voices, but I do think Gwendolyn Van Dranen did a really great job, based on reviews I've heard and other things, of portraying disability. We're following our main character, who is a girl who is in an accident, and she's a runner. One of her legs is amputated, and so she does end up learning to walk again with a prosthetic limb. And so the book is about her, this girl Jessica, trying to figure out how she can kind of relearn her body and relearn to love her body. And it's about like her determination to become a part of running track again. I think it's track that she runs. She also ends up making friends with a girl named Rosa with cerebral palsy, and I think this book, like, Jessica is very honest with herself about the fact that if she hadn't become disabled and ended up sitting next to Rosa in like the area, in a certain area of the classroom for like accessibility reasons, like if she hadn't been like sat next to her after this life change, she admits to herself that she probably wouldn't have gotten to know Rosa, that she wouldn't have reached out and thought of her as somebody who she would be friends with, and I think that is handled really well. I also want to mention something that other reviewers have noted, and that is like there's a couple times where Jessica does things when it comes to like trying to help and support Rosa, where she does things that are a little, I don't want to say pushy, but like they're not quite as based on talking to Rosa about what she wants as like we would want to see if this book were written today. I think this is from quite a few years ago. Yeah, 2011, so like a decade ago, and even in that decade there has been quite a bit of change in how we talk about these topics, although there is obviously still a long way to go. So I do want to mention that it's not like a perfect book as far as that goes, but I think the characterization is great. I really enjoyed the writing. I think the story itself is fantastic. I think it talks about a lot of important ideas, and I think I already mentioned this, but like the whole cast of characters is really, really well written, and like the friendships and everything, so really love that one. Next I have Puddin by Julie Murphy, and this is a companion book to Dumplin', and I just want to start off this recommendation with saying if you didn't like Dumplin' or you had mixed feelings, please pick this up anyway, like if the premise at all interests you, because I was not a big fan of Dumplin' at all, but I'm so glad that I still read Puddin because I loved it. We're following two main characters, Millie and Callie. We met both of them in Dumplin', and Callie's kind of, well, she's not kind of, she's really like the mean girl of that book, or one of them, and Millie is just like the sweetest little ray of sunshine who deserves the world. So it's very interesting to have both of them as the main characters of this book, but I loved it. Something else that's really cool is that Millie is plus sized, and this book is not about her struggling to accept herself. Like, she does have moments of doubt because of the way people treat her, but it's primarily about her convincing other people that she loves herself the way she is, and her convincing other people that she is capable of doing these amazing things. Like, she wants to be a journalist, like a news reporter, and seeing her pursue that is wonderful. Seeing Callie's transformation is also very satisfying. Like, she is very unlikable at the beginning, and I totally get why that might not be everyone's thing. But I personally feel like it's worth it. There's also a couple of romance subplots, one for each of them, and I really liked those. So I just think this is a really wonderful book. I gave it 4.5 stars when I read it, and like I said, I was not a big fan of Dumplin', so I would still recommend this one. Next is in the category of kind of like, I guess both categories. Like, this is a relatively well-known book, and also it's very polarizing, so I just don't talk about it, but I really enjoyed it, and that is Heartless by Marissa Meyer. So this is a standalone retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and it's a villain origin story for the Queen of Hearts. You guys know, I don't like villain origin stories. This is one of the very few ones that has worked for me, and I just really liked this. I'm also just, I really click with Marissa Meyer's style of writing. Like, I think that her writing itself works for me really well. I think her way of drawing characters, and especially character dynamics and relationships, all of that just really works for me with everything I've read from her so far. So I think I kind of had that advantage going into this book. But I also really loved the world. I thought it was so interesting following Catherine as the main character, and I think that this book did such a good job of getting us invested, even though we know how some things are going to go probably. And I have to say, like, one thing that frustrates me about the response to this book is it seems like a lot of people who don't like some things about the way this book turned out are the same people who complain about YA books like not going far enough. And it's like, well, it sure seems like when they do, you guys still complain about it. So I just find that personally very irritating, but I did really enjoy this. I think it's really well done. Another thing that really helped is I really loved Jest. He's like the love interest character, and I just think Marissa Meyer is really good at writing love interests, so that also helped. But yes, I really enjoyed this one. Next I have Seraphina by Rachel Hartman, and Rachel Hartman is like an incredibly talented fantasy author, and I just don't feel like she gets enough attention. Like, her world building is masterful, her characterization is so good, her writing itself is brilliant. Like, I feel like she does a lot of things that like people on booktube or book blogging would really enjoy, like tend to really enjoy in fantasy books, and I just want her to get more attention. So this is the first book in her Seraphina world. So there's Seraphina, and then there's a sequel to that book, and then there's a spin-off duology. The first one is Test of the Road, which is also wonderful. So the premise of this book, we're following Seraphina as our main character, and in this fantasy world, it's kind of like loosely inspired by, I think, like the medieval period, although it definitely does its own thing as well. So there are dragons in this world, and the take on dragons is so interesting. So they can take human form, and they do this to kind of learn about the human world. They're kind of like ambassadors, or kind of like for intellectual curiosity reasons, because like the dragons are very like scholarly, and so they can take human form. And sometimes, as a result of that, you end up with children who are part dragon and part human, because sometimes dragons in human form will like marry and have children with humans, even though it's illegal. They're not supposed to do that. And Seraphina is one of those children. So she is half dragon, and it's very dangerous to be found out to be half dragon, so she has concealed this her whole life. So Seraphina is a brilliant musician, and she ends up joining the royal court, and she happens to do this right as a member of the royal family is murdered in a way that makes it look like a dragon did it, and the peace between the dragons and the humans is very tenuous right now, so this is really bad news for everybody. So Seraphina ends up kind of getting drawn into this murder mystery investigation, along with the prince, who is the captain of the guard. The reason he is because he's actually a bastard, and so he is not, like, he's allowed to do things like be the captain of the guard, instead of like helping rule the kingdom. So their dynamic is really wonderful. I think the mystery is interesting. I think the world is fantastic. And again, like, I just think that Rachel Hartman does a lot of things people like in fantasy, and I want more people to read her books. I will say that the sequel to this one I didn't enjoy quite as much, but maybe I need to reread it, because I think there are some parts where, like, knowing what's coming, I would enjoy it more. So maybe I'll have to pick that up at some point. And Test of the Road is also brilliant, but I do think that you would need to read Seraphina before reading Test of the Road. Not necessarily the sequel to Seraphina, but at least this book. I hope that wasn't confusing. I promise it's not that confusing. I just made it sound like it is. Next, I had The Lost Kingdom of Boumar by Gail Carson Levine. So this is one of the very few prequels that I have enjoyed. I don't tend to find those super interesting in general, but this is a prequel to, obviously, The Two Princesses of Bamarre, which is my favorite book by Gail Carson Levine. It has a very special place in my heart, and I think one of the reasons this book works for me as a prequel is because it is set so far in the past that it almost doesn't feel like the same story. So we're following our main character, who is a girl named Peregrine, and she has always grown up believing that she is Lakti, which is a particular like group of people in this world. And one day she finds out that she's actually not. She was a Bamarre by birth, and the Lakti are actually the people who took over and colonized Bamarre. And so like they look down on the Bamarre people as being like just really like unintelligent and like not deserving, and basically just treat them badly all around. They're believed to be very weak and cowardly as well. And so at first Peregrine is horrified. She doesn't want to be one of these people, but throughout the book she ends up learning more about the history of these countries, or of these groups of people, and what actually happened, because of course she's grown up thinking that the Lakti are the good guys, and she ends up finding out that that's not really the case. And I just think this book did a lot of things really well. Like, I thought Peregrine's character development is really good. She is definitely very frustrating at the beginning because she like has grown up, you know, indoctrinated in these particular ideas. But I think she develops really well. There's some side characters I love. I think there's some really interesting things said about family and home. And I think the themes about colonization and like discrimination and all of that are also handled really well. And this is just a really well done book. Like, I didn't enjoy the other prequel by this author I read, but this one I think is fantastic. Next I have All-American Muslim Girl by Nadine Jolie Courtney, and this is a really wonderful contemporary. We're following our main character, who is a girl who is Circassian, and culturally she is Muslim, like her family is. She's white passing. And her family has never been particularly religious, but one day she witnesses her father being racially profiled, and this ends up making her start to, about her family and about the way that she has been raised, it makes her more interested in learning about her religion and actually starting to pursue that and practice it. And she also has a relationship with this boy who she really likes, but she ends up finding out that his family is connected to some really horrible things, like his father is basically a prominent Islamophobe, so she's dealing with that as well. And I just think this is such a fantastic book. It is so rare that we see a book with a Muslim main character that focuses on identity like this in a way that is actually like them choosing to pursue their religion. I also really loved the friend group in this book, and like, so our main character, and I'm so sorry I don't have this book, I read it from the library, so I can't remember the main character's name, but she ends up like joining a like prayer group and like a discussion group with these other girls, and seeing them make friends is just so wonderful, and like seeing their interactions. And one of the thematic things that I really love about this book is the way that it shows how knowing what somebody's like religion or denomination or other like kind of descriptor for them, it doesn't mean you know every single thing about what they believe or the way they practice things or what their opinions on certain things are. Like, you can't know one thing about someone and then know everything else, basically. I think that was done so well, and I really think like this book should get more attention and more hype. I know that it was pretty well known when it came out initially, but I need to talk about it more, and I hope more people read it as well. Next, I have The Truth Commission by Susan Juby, or How 3 Intrepid Art Students Got to the Bottom of One Unexpectedly Dark Secret, a novel with footnotes and illustrations. All of that is on the title page here, and one of the reasons I don't talk about this book is that it's just so hard to describe. This is basically, so it's a novel that's told as if it's narrative nonfiction, I think. I'm not very good at explaining it. My friend Kathleen, who I initially got this recommendation from, is much better at explaining it. This is one of those books where, like, if I told you all the plot lines, it would seem like there's way too much happening, but it's actually done very well. Like, it did not ever feel like there was too much going on. I think our main characters are great. This is another book with a really great friend group. And I think this book deals with some difficult ideas in ways that I think are hard to get right, but I think the way it was done, it still felt respectful. And I'm avoiding spoilers, but I will put content warnings in the description if you would like any information about that. And at least as far as I remember, it felt like it was done in a respectful way. There's also some discussion of like family relationships, because our main character's older sister has become rich and famous basically from this series of graphic novels that are very obviously based on their family, and that causes some friction. And like, I feel like I'm doing such a bad job of like talking about this book and making it sound as good as it is, so I apologize for that. I've realized I forgot to explain like the basic premise, which is like The Truth Commission is our main character and her two best friends. They end up kind of like making this pledge to like tell the truth and to uncover the truth, and this ends up getting them into some situations and finding out some things that they don't know what to do with. I hope that at least made a little sense, but this is a great book. I also want to mention Book of Enchantments by Patricia C. Reedy. This is a collection of 10 short stories by her, and I actually reread this, I think the first year of my booktube channel, or maybe the second year, I don't know, for like a reread challenge, and I had been thinking I was gonna unhaul this because I didn't remember liking it very much. I loved this. I actually did a whole review talking about the different stories in this collection, so I will link that down below. Like, multiple stories in here are like 5 stars, like some of my favorite short stories I've read. And I think that, like, if you have enjoyed other books by Patricia C. Reedy, I think you would enjoy this. But I also just think if you like interesting takes on fantasy tropes and like fairy tale retellings and everything, I'm not gonna, yeah, like, I just think you would really love this. I'm not gonna go into too much detail because, again, I have a very detailed review, but I loved this and I'm actually wanting to reread it now. Next, I have Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta, or Marchetta. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy that I think is like reasonably well known. It's older, so I don't hear as much about it, but I think it's like reasonably popular, but I just don't talk about it enough. And I really love this series. I think the world building is great. I think the emotional investment is like very much there. I really grew to love a lot of these characters, and like, I feel like I don't even know how to summarize the beginning of this series, but basically it's set in this world where, let me just remind myself here on the back how it actually starts. Okay, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna read the very brief blurb on the back because I can't articulate what this book is actually about. At the age of 9, Finnegan's world is shattered by the 5 days of the unspeakable. The royal family of Lumitere is brutally murdered, an impostor seizes the throne, and a curse binds all who remain inside the kingdom's walls. Those who escape are left to roam as exiles. 10 years later, Finnegan and his mentor, Sir Topher, are summoned to meet Evangeline, a young novice with a startling claim. Balthazar, heir to the throne of Lumitere and Finnegan's childhood friend, is alive, and she can lead Finnegan to him. Even as he suspects this arrogant young woman, Finnegan also begins to believe that Lumitere might one day be raised. Yeah, so that's like the premise of the first book. I know that this is not... Like, I feel like recently people were trying to start the series and weren't enjoying it, so I get that it's not for everyone, which is kind of the theme of a lot of these books I'm talking about. But I think the characterization is great. I think that the world is really rich. I think, like I mentioned, the emotional investment, and I think that Melina Marchetta does such a brilliant job of communicating these years and years of history and trauma and suffering. Like, even from the beginning of the book, she just effortlessly weaves in this backstory and communicates things in such a way that you start the book and you already, like, understand and, like, feel what these people have gone through. Also, there's some really wonderful side characters, like, throughout the series. There's some great, like, side character relationships that I love. So, yeah, I enjoy the series. I never know how to end these when I'm done talking about a book. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today is Crimson Bound by Rosamund Hodge. And this is kind of like the poster child for books I deeply love that I never talk about because they're important to me and they're hard to recommend and people don't like them. That's a very long description, but you get the gist. And yeah, I've mentioned Rosamund Hodge as an author a few times before, but I very rarely mention her books specifically because they're so weird, they're very bizarre, they're a very particular flavor, and I adore them with all my heart, and most people don't. So I just never talk about them, but I should talk about them more. And Crimson Bound is my favorite by her. It is sort of a take on Little Red Riding Hood, and also a gender-swapped version of The Girl with No Hands, which is not a fairy tale I'm familiar with, but that is also in here. And again, I just want to, like, highlight, her books are very strange. Like, the ending of this book is very, very weird, but I think it's done brilliantly. I think Rosamund Hodge just has an incredible imagination, and I love her writing style. I think it's beautiful, I think it's descriptive and atmospheric without, like, overpowering characters or story. I love the way she writes characters. Like, she can do basically any character archetype as a protagonist, even ones that I don't tend to like, and I always love them. I think the main relationship in here is really good, and I realize I have not actually told you the setup for this book at all. So our main character is named Rochelle, and in this world there are these creatures, these people, like these beings that live in the forest that are very dangerous, and one day Rochelle makes a terrible mistake and this creature kills somebody that is very close to her, and as a result of this Rochelle ends up becoming kind of one of these creatures, although she's not one yet. Like, there's basically like 2 stages, and eventually she knows she will become this monster. But in the meantime, she has dedicated herself to fighting these creatures, and she ends up chosen to be a royal guard for this Prince Armand, and she is not at all happy about this because they have some very personal reasons for not liking the other. So there's a lot of Rochelle, like, trying to navigate this world of, like, court politics and backstabbing and machinations that she's not used to. And even though these two really don't like each other, they end up having to work together because they start realizing that that their world is in danger, that basically something bad is going to happen and they have to try and figure out what that is and who's doing this. And this is like a very vague summary, but I love this book so, so much. This is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I love these characters. I love Rochelle and Armand's dynamic, and I think, like, it's such a satisfying relationship because they have very believable reasons for not liking or not trusting the other, and seeing them learn about the other person and start to let their walls down and, like, realize that they misjudged the other person is just so satisfying and so wonderful. I also, like, just love, this is like a very specific thing, but I love that Armand is not described as, like, amazingly handsome. Like, he's actually pretty plain and ordinary looking, and yet he's still one of the, like, best, like, love interests I've ever read. And I wish we had more of that in, like, characters and love interests. Like, I just think that would be really refreshing. So just like as a side note, but Rochelle and Armand are just great characters. I love the setting. Like, this, I think it's like a take on the Sun King's court. I think the fantasy world is super interesting. Yeah, again, I just, like, always love Rosamund Hodge's writing and concepts, and like the way she writes her characters. I'm gonna try and get myself to talk about her books more because I think it is possible that people could enjoy her books. Like, obviously there are people who do enjoy her books, so I should mention them more, even though I'm afraid that people will hate them. So anyway, that was my exceptionally long recommendations video. I had a lot of books to talk about, and, like, I tried to narrow it down, and I even did narrow it down quite a bit because I know I'm gonna do more of these later, but I still just had so many excellent books to talk about, and ones that like I really want to talk about more, because obviously that's the point of this video. So please comment down below and let me know if you have read and enjoyed any of these books, or if you're going to pick them up, and let me know a book that you love that is underhyped and you don't talk about enough and that you want to do that more. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!